Hi everyone. Happy weekend. I hope you're all doing well. Thanks for being here today with me. A lot of you mentioned to check out hot pressed watercolor paper because it is a lot smoother and should be easier on the pens. So I went ahead and I ordered two different brands. My track record with Arch's watercolor paper is not very good. So far, I have not really liked any of their watercolor paper. I would like to say that this is just my opinion. A lot of people love the Arches watercolor paper, and good for them. It does not really work for me. But I thought maybe I have just not found the right Arches paper. So I wanted to say that before I'm going to say what I'm going to say next. I opened both packages and I could smell something. And I wasn't sure exactly what it was. So I decided that because this paper is the smaller one and it will work with what I wanted to do today, I would go with the Arches paper first. I opened it up like this and I pulled out a piece of paper and I taped it down, and then I added water to it, and the smell was too overpowering. Now, I cannot use this paper in this state. I will put it outside, I will air it out, and I will try again, but I cannot work with this paper. The smell is so strong and pungent. It almost smells like dead fish. I'm not lying. I looked up what it was made of, and it seems that it has gelatin in it. And from what I understand, the gelatin will help with the surface. I don't know exactly how hot pressed paper is made. What I do know is that for whatever reason they put gelatin in the process of making this paper. It's not working. So I'm sad to say that this paper is out for me at this moment until I try to air it out. Or maybe I just need to wear my mask with it, which I don't want to do. Which leaves me with the Hahnemuhle paper, which is a little bit bigger, but that's not a big deal. I like to buy my paper bigger so I can cut it down to size. And Hahnemuhle is 100% vegan. And now I know why. I don't know why I didn't put two and two together before I made the purchase, but I also didn't know it was going to be this strong of a scent. So if you don't know why this makes it vegan, Google how to make gelatin. I am not going into it here. But, you know, if you want, you can go ahead and Google it. Anyway, and here is what I thought we should do. If you are one of the OGs of this channel, you may recognize this little doodle painting. I thought it's been 2 years and maybe I should revisit this style and see how I approach it today, 2 years later. I know a lot of you love the neurographic art, and this is based on Neurographica. It is not Neurographica. I implement the neurographic lines into my paintings. I still do to this day, only much, much less. I incorporate a lot more intuitive painting in my paintings today. So what I thought would be fun is just to see how would I approach a painting like this today. So this is the plan. This is what we're gonna go with. Okay, so I cut it to size and I taped the edges, and it is the same size now. I cut the first piece, and then I realized I cut it too small, so I had to cut a second piece. So here we are. From what I can tell, first glance, is that it is so smooth. It's almost smoother like your run-of-the-mill Canson watercolor paper, the cold press. So I don't know how I feel about it. I know I come across very high maintenance, but when you're used to a certain type of paper for a long time, starting to work with something new is a little overwhelming. But anyway, we will continue to work with this. From what I can tell is there's not really a front or a back side. Both seem very smooth. I used Sharpies for the thicker lines for this one. I am not going to use Sharpies today because Sharpies also have a very strong smell, and I just can't deal with the smell today. So I'm just going to be using some of my pens, my liner pens that I already have. I hope you will enjoy this next part of me creating the lines and rounding out the corners. And if you're new to this process, I will put a voiceover over it and explain it a little bit more. I am going to start off the footage with just normal speed so you can get a sense of how fast I am drawing these lines, and then I will speed things up a little bit later on. Also, there's parts of the painting process and the doodling process that will be sped up as well, just because there was so much footage. I had to cut out quite a bit, and I had to condense things a little bit more to make this video a little bit more manageable. The way I start out the neural lines is I draw random lines onto the paper. Normally I don't have any rhyme or reason, and I generally don't pay too much attention where I put these lines. And that is actually the better way to approach them. However, because I had the original painting in mind, my lines here were a little bit more deliberate. So if you're thinking to yourself that this doesn't look very intuitive, you are correct. If you are curious about neurographic lines, or you want to know more about the origin, about how they came to be, I will link the originator's YouTube channel in the description box below. You can go check that out and see for yourself. I would also suggest you look them up on YouTube just by searching hashtag neurographic lines, and I am very certain that a lot of videos will pop up for you to watch. Not everybody in those videos will draw actual neurographica. A lot of us use the lines to enhance our work, or to, bring in these elements into our drawings. I have done so many videos using neurographic lines, so if you are at all curious, you can always go back and watch them. I think I have a playlist where most of those are in. I think you might have to look under doodles or watercolors and doodles. I don't think I have a specific one for neurographic art, but there is so many that I have done in the past. But the way I usually approach them is I start out with the lines. I usually don't have a specific idea, with the exception of this one, because it's a different approach in this specific video. But generally, I just start drawing lines. I often use my left hand, my non-dominant hand, because I have a little bit less control over that hand, and that helps. Sometimes I push a coin around on my paper. Sometimes I use a stick and ink, all different kinds of things. Not always are they as neat as I am drawing them here. I was in the mood for very precise lines today. Don't ask me why. That just happens sometimes. You may have seen me add extra lines, and I do that sometimes when the area is too big or it looks too wonky, and that's when I just fill in lines here and there. That's not a wrong way to do it, but it helps breaking up some of those bigger areas. Rounding out of those corners is a very important step in neurographic art. So don't skip that. That is what makes this neurographic art, the rounding out of the corners. And once you start, don't be surprised if you feel very relaxed doing it. That is exactly the point of doing this process. So I rounded out all of my corners. Sometimes it happens that I miss one, and if that happens, then I will just go in later and round them out. But I do all of my corners before I continue with the painting process. So I've started the painting process, and immediately I realize that this paper does not absorb the paint and the water as the cold press paper does, and it's throwing me off a little bit. And you see me mop up some of the paint and using it on the other side, and I do that because I feel that this paper is not absorbing anything. I mentioned at the beginning of the video that I did try the Arches watercolor paper, and I noticed the same thing happening there as well. I wasn't sure whether the Hahnemuhle paper would work differently, but clearly I needed a little bit more practice. It just was very hard to distribute the paint and make it not look so streaky. That was my main issue, it not being able to absorb very well, and also the streakiness. It just felt like it was sitting on top of the paper. I don't think I have experienced that even with the Canson watercolor paper. So this was a little bit annoying, and it also took a long time to try and smooth everything out. So I left it for now, and I moved on to the different colors, and just still trying to make sure I don't use too much water and use enough water so that the paint will move on top of the paper. I am speeding up the footage just slightly here. So that is why it is a little bit faster. I was kind of trying to achieve a more gradient look, but I was unsuccessful. I wasn't too worried about it because I knew I was going to add the colored pencils to it, but those blue sections look just so streaky. If there's anyone out there that is used to working with hot press paper, please tell me your secrets. Let me know how you rectify that. In the original painting, I didn't have much of a plan as to where I was going to put my colors. Here, I placed them a little bit more strategically, meaning I placed the blue colors in a certain spot and then added the other colors accordingly. I wanted them to cluster a little bit more. And here also, I went back in and I tried to smooth out that streakiness by just adding a little bit more water. Not too much. I had to be very careful not to use too much water. And lo and behold, I felt like I was being a lot more successful now that the color had a chance to dry. So in the end, it didn't look as streaky anymore, but I still wasn't 100% happy. Also, that process took forever. I just don't think it needs to be this involved. I don't know if I needed to be this precise, but I didn't know which parts of the painting were going to be covered by the doodles, so I decided to just pay attention to the larger sections. I knew that the smaller ones would most likely be covered. And then I had painted this section green and then I changed my mind. I wanted it blue. And when I was working on the streakiness, I had noticed how easily I could lift the color off the paper. And so I tried to lift it off of this section so that I then could go back in and paint over it. And look at how nicely that pigment came off the paper. I have never seen anything like it before. Granted, the color had been applied very thinly, but look at this. It's almost all gone. I also knew that I was going to apply a slightly darker color on top of it that would cover whatever was left on the paper. But man, I have never seen anything like it before. That just blew me away. So now I had filled in all of the sections that I wanted a little bit brighter. The original piece had a softer edge, and so I tried to achieve that same look by just adding a lighter wash to the outside of the painting. But again, I was struggling so much with the streakiness. It was driving me batty, I am not going to lie. But I had to keep going, so I just try to not pay too much attention to it. I did go in again later once it was a little bit more dry to try and smooth it out a little bit more, but I think that took the longest to try and fix the streakiness. So here is what I have so far. I like it, and I am ready to proceed with the doodles. I am starting out with more simple lines just to get in the groove. I am a little overwhelmed at this point with the sheer amount of sections that I have to doodle in. To be honest, I am not used to doodling this way anymore. I have moved on from this style quite a bit, and honestly, I usually don't like having this many doodles in one space. It seems a little bit too cluttered to me and a little bit too busy because the neurographic lines are already quite busy, and then adding so many different styles of doodles on top of it just kind of makes my brain hurt. But the idea was to recreate what I had, and so that's what I did. Don't get me wrong, I still like doodling, but nowadays it's more lines and dots. And I apply those lines in all different kinds of ways, and I still apply the neurographic lines every now and then. But yeah, I don't think I will go back to this style again. It is a wonderful tool when you want to do something mindless, and or when you don't know what to do and you just want to put something on a piece of paper. But if you give me a choice, I will always prefer just simple lines and dots. Also, I quickly ran out of ideas and I had to refer back to some of my older doodle pages that I have done. And I also looked up other people's doodles and didn't copy it per se, but just to try and get some new ideas. So that also took quite a bit of time. The smaller sections were a little bit easier to fill. What I struggled with more was the bigger sections here. I just needed something that would fill up a space quite fast. If you are ever looking for new doodle ideas, I highly recommend you check out Miss Betsy on YouTube. I found her in the beginning of my art journey on Instagram and was fascinated by all of her doodles. And watching her and then trying it out for myself helped me a lot in the beginning to get back into creating art. And so if you are interested, I will link her channel information in the description box below as well. She is not only a wealth of information, but she's also a wonderful teacher. So please go check her out if you haven't already. Well, I have quite a bit of doodling ahead of me, so I will go ahead and let you watch it. I'm going to put some music on, and then I will be back later on with some more chitter chatter. All right, I hope you enjoyed this little doodle session, and this is what I have so far. So I am taking out my colored pencils now, and I am starting to shade. I really enjoyed using the pencils on this paper so much more than the watercolors. I love how the pencil marks show up on this paper, and it just was such a joy to use them. They were smooth, it gives it a nice texture. It was amazing, and I look forward to using the pencils on this paper again in the future. I think shading the different sections and around the busy part of this painting helped everything pop so much more. So for each color, I used different shades, and I just blended and blended and then blended some more. I also used a little bit of black, and I made sure that I used the colors on top of each other. I am really glad I did this. I think it helped elevate everything. I did not do this in the original painting. There, I tried to achieve kind of that look, but I stuck with just watercolors. Had I not struggled applying the watercolors so much, maybe I would have tried to do it here again, but I'm so glad I switched to the pencils because I just couldn't imagine having to try and do this with watercolors on this type of paper. And so here is what this looks like. Doesn't that look great? I really like it. So now we're going to continue with the silver pen. And I used that exact silver pen in the original painting as well. The reason why I had to use it in the first painting was because some of the watercolor turned out too dark, so that I couldn't see the black pen on top of it anymore. And so I had to almost highlight a little bit with this silver pen. I like how it looked, but I like the application on this new painting even more. And I think it's because I can use it a little bit more as a highlighter, other than having to accentuate what's already there, if that makes sense. So now if you move the paper around a little bit, you can catch a glimpse of a little bit of sparkle here and there. And I think that's all it needs. It doesn't really need any more than that. So I continue to put some highlights here and there wherever I feel like it needs it. And then I move on to the next step, which is dots. And if you've been around for a little while, you know I love my dots. And the way I apply them these days is with acrylic paint and my dotting tools. In the original painting, I used a white marker, and when I looked back on it, I can now tell that that white marker has kind of taken on the colors underneath and is not a true white anymore. It still happens with the acrylic paint, especially because this specific one is a little bit thinner. So I still have that issue sometimes. So I think only time will tell to see if these also will fade or take on a different color in the future. I am just finishing with the last few dots here, and then I am ready to take the tape off the sides. This tape stuck to the paper quite a bit, and I had to take my hairdryer to it to loosen up the glue a little bit, and then it came off like a charm. But let's go ahead and listen in to my final thoughts and have a closer look. Okay, here we are. What do we think? I really like it. And like I mentioned, I almost feel like it should go this way instead. I think it looks more fun this way. I intended it to be this way, but this is how it goes. Sometimes you just have to change your mind a little bit. Here is the original. I would like to think that my style has improved a lot. I can see that in the original one, the doodles could be a little bit cleaner. And I think I have vastly improved that, although, you know, I did mess up on some of them. But overall, this looks a lot cleaner than this one. And it's just nice to see that you can improve with time. I definitely did certain areas a little bit too dark in this one. I like bringing in the colored pencils because it just elevates the pieces so much that I feel like there is a world of difference between the two. I'm not saying that one is better than the other. It's just that, you know, I can definitely see that this is a beginner piece. I still love it, obviously, because I have it still. But I also like this one. So as far as that, I am very happy with how it turned out. I am wondering if I would have enjoyed the process a little bit more had I practiced working on this paper beforehand. I kind of just jumped in and I did not think that it would give me the issues that it did. And I am willing to work with it a little bit more because I want to see what it does when I apply it to my other styles. And so it'll be interesting to see, you know, how much water does it take and does it really like stay like floating on the surface. It was really weird to have that experience. It just was not absorbing, which was worked great by, you know, having to lift up the color here. And I was pretty amazed that I was able to do that on this paper. So there is pros and cons with everything, especially when you work with a substrate that you're unfamiliar with. But like I said, I am excited to keep trying different things on this paper. Thanks to those who have suggested it to me. And I am also looking forward to using it with my colored pencils a lot more. I think this paper lends itself very well for color pencils. So let me give you a quick close-up of it, and then we're gonna call this a day because this video is already very long. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy days to spend some time with me. Let me know in the comments whether you liked it or not. And go check out the original if you haven't already. And go watch Miss Betsy because she's wonderful. And I will see you next week.